Okay, good morning, everybody. If you haven't put your name in the attendees section of the meeting notes, if you could do that, that would be awesome. Let's actually just quickly go around and introduce ourselves really fast. Hi, I'm Elsie. I'm from CoreOS. I'm a community manager.
Hey, this is Garrett. I'm a technical program manager at Google.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm the SIG testing co-founder working for Samsung SDS.
Hey guys, this is Sadhu Zal at IBM. I'm a developer.
Morgan, also at IBM.
Oh, sorry. I'm Jay Singer-Dumars at Microsoft, the full-time Kubernetes upstream community person.
Awesome. Thank you.
Josh Burkus at Red Hat. I'm Project Atomic Community Manager.
And I'm George Castro, Community Manager at Heptio.
I'm Caleb Miles, a Technical Program Manager at CoreOS.
Cool. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call this morning. It looks like we have a new section, Garrett. Is that, but it's in the last half, right, of the meeting?
Yeah, let's do that in the last half. I'll ping Matt. Matt didn't say he's on the line, but I'll ask him. He said that he had some contributor experience problems, and I think it's something that we should encourage is to get feedback like this. So having a fun name section might encourage that a little bit more.
Okay, cool. So we'll circle back around to that. Something that popped up on the mailing lists recently was a need for guidelines around the help wanted label. Here's the particular thread if you're interested in it. Brian requested that we get working on creating clear guidelines around how the help wanted label should be used, and creating a triage process and figuring out how to promote it and delegate these issues to the interested parties. Do you guys think that this is something that we should try and tackle in 1.8? And is there some interest in doing it?
I think one question I have is, what are we actually trying to accomplish with the help wanted label? Is it that we provide an easy entry point for people to do stuff? Is it areas where there's a critical concern that needs to be addressed from a project perspective? Or I guess I'd like to see define the need first and then decide if the help wanted label is the right vehicle to actually accomplish what we want or what Brian wants.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. To my understanding, it is about creating clear entry points into the project for people looking for a way to contribute, but not sure how. Does that mesh with everybody else's understanding of what that label is for?
I agree with that concept, yes.
Yes, I do, but I think, with any issue, which is not already been assigned to anybody, that explicitly seems like an help wanted, right? It's an open issue, it's an entry point for anybody, who wants to contribute, right? For, with help wanted, I mean, one of the things I found useful for the new contributors in some of the older project is, if we also tag something like low-hanging fruit, right? Help wanted can be, it can be like a more like an complicated issue, right? Where we need help and it may not be right fit for some of the new contributor. So I don't know if you already have something where we identified, which is like a more fit for the new guys, right? Something which is less complicated. But like I said, if it's not assigned, then it seems like it's already open and where, we need help, right?
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a fair point.
Well, except sometimes on some things you get to things where there's been user requests for a feature or a change, but nobody who's currently contributing to the SIG either, has an interest in that or has the ability to implement the request. That is, it's something where the SIG says, yes, we actually want this strategically, but there's absolutely nobody to work on it. And that might be a substantial feature or complicated. So, I mean, that's another reason to have the sort of help wanted tag, but it's a very different kind of help wanted than, here's some low-hanging fruit that a newbie could work on.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the tag shouldn't be standalone, right? It would need to have like a scope of difficulty, right? Like there's a difference between this is a small bug that a new contributor can fix and this is a huge feature that we want, but it needs to be spec'd out. It needs to be debated in the community, go through the drafting process, all that kind of stuff. So like, I feel like that's two separate goals, or one's more of a low hanging fruit. I'm a developer and I'm looking for small bite-sized bugs.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, I need to spec out the next generation scheduler thing.
Well, so as you're saying this, it makes me think that that kind of help wanted discussion should be happening in a SIG, not in a label. So if I'm going to develop the next gen storage plugin and I want to do that, I want to go to SIG storage to get that help, not just like put a message in a bottle out in the Kubernetes repo and say, hey, help. So I think that if we encourage the pattern, the patterns being, if you have a feature that you need help with, go find a SIG for it. And if there isn't a SIG, make one or make a working group. And if you're a new contributor and you want to just start getting your feet wet, I think that we should make the help wanted label that initial sort of user experience type label. And if so, I think that would be totally within our purview.
And here's another thought. To me, it seems like every time an issue is open, like I was saying, that's help wanted. So I was wondering if even just a thought, that every time an issue is open, it's automatically labeled help wanted, and as long as somebody assign it to himself or herself, it gets removed. Maybe not.
I'm thinking that's a cruft generator.
That seems like that just that's assignees, right? Like I'm not sure if we get any more information. We could just search all unassigned issues, right? Isn't that the same thing?
Well, exactly. No, I agree. Yeah, I mean, unassigned issues are help wanted to me. Honestly, as I was saying earlier, because they are sitting there, and nobody's looking at it, right?
Yeah, right. But I think our proposal with issue triage from a few weeks ago was to get it out to the SIGs and defining the policy for the SIGs as far as issue triage. We don't necessarily need an individual to assign them just because of the rate at which issues are coming in. But we want to encourage people, like even new issue filers, to be able to mention the SIG that it should go to.
Yeah, I agree on that SIG label, yeah.
Right. Wouldn't we want the SIG to also suss out the accessibility of the thing, right? I mean, somebody with expert level, let me put it this way, only somebody who knows that it's easy can say it's easy, right?
Right.
So you would hopefully have whoever the triage person that adds the help wanted label knows that this is something that is a specific target for a good user experience. So that would be
something like a generalized definition, right? To kind of just power it down to the SIGs for them to actually determine, like a loose definition of what a help wanted label should be.
Yeah, it's an issue that a junior level developer can either triage and resolve or pair on or something like that. And maybe
who's doing that? Someone's got Control Z held down in the dock. Or Control V.
That's you, Garrett.
Is it you?
Is it me?
Yeah.
We need a help wanted for that, to stop that.
My hands are up, guys. And there's nothing near my keyboard. This is in a Silicon Valley moment.
That is the greatest thing ever.
Help, 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 help.
I mean, if you sort of look at the email that Brian Grant sent, I cannot speak when I first start talking. Okay, let's try this again. When you look at the email that Brian Grant sent out, he lists a bunch of bullet points about all the reasons he didn't think things should be marked as help wanted. And if you invert that, help wanted things should be things that are not too hard to implement by newcomers. They either have the design work already done or they have design work that we have the time to do. They adequately describe what needs to be done or how it should be done. They are still needing to be done, so they haven't been like already done by somebody else. We still want to do them. We actually have the time to review the changes. We actually have the time to update the docs, and they don't require multiple PRs to accomplish, or and we're not in code freeze, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of we in there, and I think the we is kind of the SIG that has the help wanted issue assigned to them. A lot of this also seems to be confused with priority. Like, I think the urgency, the priority that a SIG assigns to an issue is already signified by the priority labels, right? Help wanted is almost, sometimes it seems like that would be a nice to have, but it's so low down our priority queue, nobody within the SIG is going to work on it. You need to definitely, because we also have this label like for newcomers. It's weird, but I think like that's what we're trying to say the help wanted label should be, right? It should be onboarding style issues for somebody who just wants to get their feet wet in the project. What's the simplest, lowest hanging fruit for them to do? And key amongst all of that is the SIGs actually taking time to go through and triage the issues that have been assigned to them to figure out what is the low hanging fruit. And so I guess what we're trying to do here is come up with the guidelines that describe what low hanging fruit looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
yes.
hopefully
I think we need to define the cross-cutting SIG policy as, I forget if it was Jason or George who said it, that the SIGs are the ones that know if it's help wanted. They're the ones that know how, like, if the design's been done and if it's an easy to implement thing. We need to define what kinds of things are help wanted. We're probably not going to come up with an all-encompassing definition, but like these kinds of specs are a pretty good idea. And then we need to pass it to the SIG and suggest some way that they can start applying the label. I also think that there should be some kind of someone that's experienced with PRs in Kubernetes to help shepherd the process along.
Yes.
At this point, unfortunately, it's not the easiest thing in the world to get a PR merged with all the rebases, with getting the labels applied, the correct labels applied, finding out who, and I think once you've done it one or two times, it's not incredibly difficult, but going through it for your first time, it's, some of it's our own custom automation that you have to learn. So I think those are the kinds of things that we should be doing, defining the help wanted, defining what the label is and making that very easy to identify, and then making it very clear to SIGs what we expect, or what we would like in terms of getting the label applied.
Right. Once the label's applied, you have to follow through. Each SIG has to shepherd the guy all the way through the entire process.
Yeah. Get the PR done.
Yeah.
I think another aspect of this too is that we want to pair people if possible, or make it someone available to help shepherd whoever that is, the new contributor, through that experience. Because it's one thing to have documentation, but it's another thing to have somebody actually walk with you and pair on it. So what I would say is that it shouldn't be a requirement necessarily, but as a general rule, if you can, you should have somebody listed as I don't know how we do it, but say, I'm glad to pair with somebody on this, and put that in the comments of the PR or the issue.
Yeah, you'd have clear instructions. If it's, once you've defined this issue or this tag or whatever, somebody new comes in and they see it and they go, okay, I want to work on that. There needs to be something in that issue that says, okay, go talk to X, whether it's a SIG lead or a SIG whatever, and that person needs to be able to be around at least partially to say, okay, I'm here. If you have questions, let's walk through this together. Let's follow through.
Yeah, I think that would be tremendously helpful and very encouraging for people.
Who was working on the new contributor onboarding in the past? Because this seems very related. I remember seeing a document on that.
Sort of ish. Hold on, let me dig.
George, is there anything big that you're owning right now? Do you wanna work with me on this?
Yeah, I would love to. Now that the bug triage getting stuff is done. Absolutely.
Okay. And define. So we're going to define and document what help wanted is. Process for SIGs to apply the label, and process to shepherd issue to completion, right? Those are the things that we should be doing?
Yes.
Okay. So we probably got to get out in the community for this, I'm guessing. Aaron, does that sound right? Or whoever was talking?
Yeah, I think we should make a suggestion to the community. One other thing I wanted to put out there, I don't think you can apply or remove the help wanted label via the bot. So I am incapable of managing the help wanted label for the 2 issues that are assigned to my SIG, one of which, as I'm looking at it now, does not fit this criteria, but I can't do anything about that.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I would add one less step in there, which is for us to actually dog food this process and find a contributor and walk them, or follow them through this experience once it's in place.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So we've got that done. Should we move on to the next thing?
Yeah. I just wanted to do a fast shout out to George for the triaging he did on the issues with the kind support label. And in that discussion, it was brought up if we still need that particular label. George, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, so everything that's left with that label also has the correct other labels that it needs, so we can literally just blow that label away and make sure nothing new is created with it, and we wouldn't lose anything except getting rid of a label.
Cool. Does anybody have any points to bring up for why we should keep it? Nope. Silence? Okay, cool.
Does anyone have power to actually do all that? Or like what happens when we all say, yay, let's do that?
I'm not sure. Garrett, do you know what the process is for actually like removing a label?
Like deleting it from use? Is that the question?
Yeah.
No, I think that came up in the email, right? The hardware accelerator.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping Brian had those powers where he could just.
I think historically that's what it's been.
Uh-huh.
And maybe we need to work on defining that process a little bit more clearly. Brian's kind of curated the labels, but I think at this point there's 100. How many labels are there, Aaron? There's like 60 just area ones.
Over 160. Oh yeah, I have thoughts and opinions on this. This is begging the agenda item down below.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have a formalized process for adding or deleting labels. And we probably could use some metrics there so that we can find stale labels and just get rid of them because they only lead to more clutter.
Yes, project management. This is true.
No, we could always just make it an item to work on a label creation and deletion process and then dog food that through the thing we just defined.
So let me ramble for just a few minutes. I don't know if I'm going to go off agenda on this. Is this an appropriate time to talk about labels? Or do you have other stuff we should be talking about first?
I think labels was something major that we're trying to address this quarter, so go for it.
Okay, so this is something like I care about and I really would like to have the time to work on with dedicated blocks of time. However, I am super in favor if other people want to pick up this torch or carry it forward. And I recognize that a large part of starting this is to actually document all the things I'm about to ramble on. So this is like off the top of my head. But I think that we should, there's something about like stabilize the patient. So pick one repository that supposedly has the canonical set of labels. I would say it's Kubernetes. Then I would make an effort to document what all of those labels are. Then I would come up with a report that sort of defines how many issues have those labels applied, figure out if it makes sense for those labels to be there, and try to roughly sort of reverse engineer like what some of the labels mean. So we have many, many area labels, for example. I don't really know what those are. We should have a larger discussion about why area labels. What do they represent? There's a movement that's sort of release note related and release related about creating component labels because Release notes that are generated and broken out by SIG are not user-friendly. Users come to us understanding components. I'm not quite sure what a component is, but I think it's like fuzzily, like some set of well-known binaries, such as Kube Controller Manager, Kube Scheduler, Kube API Server, but may also include add-ons like Kube DNS and Heapster and things like that. There are also a variety of kind labels, some of which seem more useful than others. For example, kind technical debt versus kind cleanup versus kind enhancement. There's also kind feature, kind documentation, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure where the appropriate place to have the discussions on like paring these down is, but we should at least start with, this is a reasonable set of labels that are well understood and easy to document. These are the labels that seem to be questionable. And then I think maybe as a first pass, somebody with superhuman labeling powers can like remove the label from issues that don't need it. So for example, the team cluster deprecated do not use label should probably go ahead and die in a fire, unless there are issues that don't have the appropriate thing. But I think since our grand like needs SIG label triage, everything should have a SIG label, so I don't think we need those team whatever deprecated do not use labels anymore. Let's see, that gets us most of the way there in terms of stabilizing the patient. What do we have? Next, we should figure out what is the set of labels. All right, so then there are two other things. What is the set of labels that we consistently want to use across the Kubernetes project as a whole? That is, what is the set of labels that should be consistent in every single repository in the Kubernetes project, consistent to the point of how they are used, why they are used, and they do actually exist in all the same places with the same names, the same colors, whatever, well understood processes. And then what's the mechanism we should use to enforce this, and how permissive should it be? I have in my head the concept of there's like a Munge GitHub Munger right now that can actually look at labels.yaml and make sure that all of the labels that are listed there exist in the repository for which it's running. But I find that to be insufficient for our needs because you have to run one copy of Munge GitHub for every single repository that it's watching. I would instead like to move that to Prow, so there is one plugin turned on for multiple repos that could do the same sort of thing. Then the question becomes, do you want to have a labels YAML file in every single repo, or do you want to have that one pointed at one authoritative labels YAML file in some central repo? Let's call it repo infra, a repo created for general repository reuse across the Kubernetes organization. And the question comes, do you want the bot to enforce that only labels in that file should exist within the repo so as to discourage humans from creating brand new labels that are undocumented and not a part of that file? Or do you want the bot to be permissive for certain repositories that are still evolving or finding new uses that make sense to them, but not necessarily to other repos in the project? So for example, I could see the COPS, the KOPS repo having labels or components or whatever that are applicable just to COPS, but probably not to the broader Kubernetes project. I could see the kubernetes.github.io repository having a bunch of documentation related labels that are applicable there that are applicable to the rest of the project. So probably wanting to find some way for each repo or project to have their own custom labels in addition to the standard labels. And then, you sort of steer people towards pull requests to these file or files as the sole source of truth for how you create and remove labels. You go through the traditional pull request process where people can discuss their motivations for adding or removing said labels. And I think that's enough rambling. Does that sound like sort of a coherent plan that maybe if I go back and watch the recording of this, I could distill into a proposal or issue or something?
Yes.
Yeah, that was great, Aaron. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? That was like, I really, it's been stewing in my head, but I haven't actually written it down. So I really do need to just.
Yeah, I would start with what you said at the end first, though. A standardized set of labels that's consistent for everybody. And then, whatever's important for that SIG, they can have their own little custom set of labels. It would be nice if there was a way that if, we didn't let that clutter. I'm just fearing to see, like, as I was getting rid of some of these labels, I saw some issues. It just had way too many labels, and it was almost like, at that point, are they useful?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is, like, I really do think there are a lot of labels that should go away, and I want to have an open discussion about that process. And it's just unclear to me whether it's worth, like, taking a human pass at slowly culling down a set of labels, or if we start from the standard set and evolve our way out from there. But my key is to make sure these decisions aren't made unilaterally and somebody doesn't just go press a button. That sufficient warning is given, that there is sufficient discussion ahead of time, and people understand the reasoning and motivation for it.
Did I capture everything? I tried to summarize. Am I missing something here?
Yes, I think you got it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Like I
Garrett,
said,
by the way, for pitching in on note-taking.
I appreciate
I'm completely spaced on asking for a volunteer to do that at the beginning of the meeting.
That's okay.
So I will try and sort of go back and fill this in once I have a chance to watch the recording, and then I'll use this as the template for like a proposal issue or an email out to this group.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Sadev, do you want to talk about reviewing the request for a triage guideline?
Sure, thanks. Yep. Yeah, I just, so Georgia and I, we created a PR for the triage guideline we've been, discussing for some time now, right? Based on the last meetings, discussion. So I just wanted to remind folks, we did send an email. It's out there. We had few minor comments. It's been taken care. There are a couple, again, minor comments that needs maybe a little bit more feedback. So, if you guys can, whenever you get a chance and take a look, I just wanted to mention here.
Great. Thank you so much for working on that. And I would like to second his request for jumping in and giving feedback.
Sure.
George, local development story?
Yeah, so this just I wanted to put this in your mind because it's like a multiple complex thing. As part of SIG cluster life cycle, one of the items that came out of the meeting was, hey, how come there is no less defined way to do local development of Kubernetes? And I realize that's a huge topic, right? You have like bigger boxes and things like that.
Yep.
Basically, the idea with the ask kind of came out of the SIG was like, it'd be really nice if there was at least, even if it ends up being a set of them, of sort of semi-blessed, official-ish ways that people can do local development on Kubernetes so that when they show up to a SIG or something, they've at least followed something.
Right.
So they have, instead of everyone having like their own Mac setup Snowflake or whatever.
Exactly. I have strong feelings on this. Sorry.
Excellent. So, yes,
No,
I would like to help whoever. Well, hopefully Morgan will just say a bunch of great things that you already have.
There needs to be. I understand the opinion that we were trying to have no opinion for anything.
Right.
This is something we need to have an opinion on, and the
I
thing
agree.
we have an opinion on needs to work, and it needs to work every time, or at least more than 50% of the time, because I've tried probably all of the different run a cube locally kind of solutions, and some of them work sometimes and the other ones don't work for specific flags and this and that. So yes, blessed way to do things. Agreed. Concur. Continue.
Who's interesting? So George, it sounded like you were potentially interested in jumping in and starting to work on this. Is anybody else interested in that?
Yeah, I would like to help. One of the things that makes this one complicated is like I don't have any Macs in the house, so like I don't know how to do any of the Mac stuff. I could do the Linux stuff, maybe test a little bit of Windows. So it's like one of those things where you need kind of
you need cross-platform
expertise from different distro people, like all sorts of like I would know how to do any of this on Fedora. Like that's just not my expertise. And it's complicated enough to. I can't just bust out a draft document, and then it would only work for someone who's like me and not, a Mac user or a Windows user. And I've looked around. I was like, well, surely someone has figured it out. And I've found all sorts of guides and things, but they're all hyper specific to to local bits, right? And then some use VMs, one's using Docker and Docker, which I thought was interesting, but then I mentioned that to someone and they were like, nope, that's a deal breaker for me. And then it's just like, it ends up being this kind of cottage industry of different things. But I agree, like, even if it feels like we need to start having a strong opinion.
I would caution that this is equivalent to the La Brea tar pit of issues, and that we need to be extremely careful in this. What I would say, the pattern that I've seen socializing many a development group I've managed into containerization and all this stuff, is that the way you do this is to provide a use case or a user experience that is so compelling that people want to use it, and then that drives adoption. If you do you must do it this way, or you'll be beaten with a stick, that never works, and it just causes churn. So what I would say is let's think about what the most incredible user experience could be to just grab a repo, start hacking on it, and have it run your tests and get immediate CI feedback, and all the great things about a solid user experience, and then see what we can do to engineer that or partner around engineering it, because otherwise there's no hope. I have scars.
Yeah, it's just such a complex topic that I only wanted to bring it up for people to start thinking about it, because I knew it would take a while.
It kind of seems like we would just need to have a separate document per platform and have owners of each platform document, because among other things, not only is there the issue of there's going to be a very different experience on Mac or very different experience on Windows, there's also the fact that the platforms and the availability of specific tools in those platforms changes constantly. So like my team could commit to keeping a document on how to do this on Fedora and CentOS updated. But even if we could write one for, just as a small leap, write one for Debian, that doesn't mean we would keep it up to date, because we just wouldn't know when things had changed.
Yeah, at that point, we're getting into the business of writing software and documentation, and that becomes a whole thing. It would be nice to leverage some sort of pattern that exists alongside the development of Kubernetes itself.
I mean, I would love to see anything, and I think if we produce a great document, like for example, I know that there's an issue with Basil on like the latest Debian, but I will happily use a VM with an older Ubuntu, for example, as long as it works for development. And I think if we start somewhere and produce a great developer experience on that, whatever that requirement is, if anyone wants to add and port it to other platforms, let them do that, right? But let's get something great, and I think people will use it. Like, I think to this day, Docker runs in a VM. Like, let's just stick with something that works, which is probably going to be a VM. And if someone happens to run the OS on their machine, so much the better. But if you're willing to do it and you know Ubuntu, then Ubuntu wins.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, that's it for me. I was just bringing it up.
Okay, great. I don't think I see Matt Liggett on the call yet.
I'm right here.
Oh, I missed you. Okay. Do you want to jump on and share your experiences?
Sure. So I don't have anything prepared as far as a screen to share or anything. I'm just going to narrate my experience as well as I can remember it. Background, I work at Google. I'm not new to Kubernetes. I've been on the project for more than a year, but I don't contribute by writing code in the open source repo that often. So the basic form of the story is, for this past release, we wanted to write some tests that verified that pod disruption budget would work in concert with
stateful sets and the node upgrade script, both the one that is part of open source for GCE clusters, and then also the one that runs internally on GKE, and eventually, of course, any upgrade, any node upgrade that is out there. But those two platforms are covered now. We wrote the tests, we wrote the PRs, and we started to get input immediately. I assumed the input was from somebody who was empowered to be an approver. I was pretty sure I'd figured that out from the beginning. But that's one thing, first of all, that's not obvious to somebody who's not a member of the project, is that the person who began, well, first of all, the notion of owners and approvers isn't obvious at all if you've never done this before. Second of all, even if you kind of get that idea, the person who's really vocal on your PR may have nothing to do with it. The robot may not have assigned that person, and they may not have the power to approve your PR. So after going back and forth and sort of pleasing and placating this person, I then discovered near the end of the quarter that, in fact, this person couldn't be my approver. It doesn't really matter who it is, because I think this tail could happen to anybody. The person who I chose to be my approver was Daniel Smith, and he didn't like what we had in mind. Basically, the problem was we wanted to add a bunch of images, like little test binaries that would run in Kubernetes and talk to, let's say, etcd, talk to Cassandra, talk to MySQL during the upgrade process and verify that they stayed reachable the whole time. And the concern was this doesn't belong in the main repo. The question I had was, where does it belong? And every example we were given, we would sort of like go there with our little story and our bowl and be like, please, will you take our code? Like, all I want to do, and I work for Google and I work on this project, I want to give you this shit. And it clearly is part of Kubernetes. Somehow, no, it doesn't belong here. No, it doesn't belong here. So imagine if I didn't work on this project at like, a big corporation that was really involved with it. They won't, like, not only will they not take it, they can't tell me where. The proposals are often like, maybe you need to own the repo. Oh, you don't understand how to like create a new Kubernetes repo? Or you need to learn that part of the process too. So I think the problem here is that it's pretty easy to just, and we're just now coming to this point where we're trying to draw really firm lines around what goes in each repository, particularly the main one. And it's very easy to come in and run afoul of that and have, and basically have nobody there to help you. I found it to be pretty exhausting and difficult, and we still don't really have a clear answer. As somebody who's working on the project, I cannot imagine what it would be like if you were just trying to make this one quick change. It's significant, but like, so I guess that's the tale of woe. Like, I don't know if I really conveyed to you how much it sucked, but imagining me as not me doing the same thing, it would have been a nightmare. I never would have kept going. And we need to help people. The answer should not be about gatekeepers saying yes or no, right? It should be about, there should be some way I could have known in advance where it was all going to go. I could have identified correct approvers easily. It really should have been easy, and nobody should have just said, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that there's a different place that's not my place that your code can go. That's all I got. Questions?
So there's like a few fundamental problems. One is like, it's very, and I'm just repeating some of the stuff you said, but it's for clarity.
Yeah.
Owners is really hard to understand for a new contributor. So like once we detect new contributors, this is probably something we want to explain since it's such a big part of the PR process, and who the relevant owners are for the work that you're doing. Make that really explicit. So even with the bot's current comment, it was hard to tell that the current person assigned could not approve your PR.
Yeah, I started to get, it wasn't actually the assignee, it was Kargakis, and he just happened to, he was neither assigned nor a potential approver. He just started to comment on the PR, which is cool. Like, I
we want to encourage that.
Say, but the thing is, it's so easy to believe that you're now having the code review. Right? because why wouldn't you be? And part, maybe I was fooled in part because I actually did think he was probably, like, I thought I saw his name earlier. I thought he was in the owner's file in question, and he wasn't. I don't know how to signal that more than we do, but at some point there's just too much text. Like, I think that the bot says a lot of things, and yet it's pretty easy to not read them all.
Ignore it. Yeah.
Go ahead, though. You were trying to restate some stuff.
Okay, so specifically for new contributors, this would have been a nightmare. Like, you have some understanding of how approvers work, and it was difficult. But if you're a new contributor, like, this whole owners thing would be very, very difficult. And the second thing was, where should my code live? So you started, like most people I imagine would, in the main repo, and then we're told, hey, we're trying to like prune things out, move it somewhere else, but no one told you where it should live. And that was difficult to search as well. This is a problem I don't think we have discussed much in the past here, but it sounds like it's going to become more and more as as we try and shard the main repo. This is definitely going to become a problem. So it's probably something we need to work on, but we don't have a decent answer for you there, I think.
Yeah.
What ended up happening, Matt?
Well, we went to Kubernetes/examples and got a similar response. Like, well, we're really trying to clean this one up. We don't want it to be a dumping ground. Your thing doesn't fit here. In the end, the best idea we got suggested was that we do have a need for a place for there to be test images, little test binaries and Docker images that help tests. Test infra might be willing to own the repo, or SIG testing. So it's on me, and that's one of the things I'm going to try and do this week, to contact SIG testing and say, look, if we create this, would you guys be willing to be responsible for it? We could move these new images plus these existing test images from the main repo, put them all in one place. I don't want to own it, right? And I think that's a burden we don't want to put on contributors. Is like, well, the answer is there needs to be a new repo for that. Plus, you might have to be the person responsible for it.
So it's a lot more work than just writing a PR.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I'm at. Is that I think that I can get SIG testing to take ownership of this, but it remains to be seen.
It's, for what it's worth, speaking as somebody from SIG testing, it's something I don't know if we have room for in our V18 roadmap, right? We've been discussing our roadmap for the past 3 weeks, and like this didn't come up at all. Do you happen to have a link to the pull request that you're talking about?
Yeah, I can share them with you. There are 3 of them. They're all basically the same, although they've merged now without the test image in place. But I can show you the code we're talking about.
I feel like for the issue of where code lives, I think we do have an answer, which is still evolving, which is that we've devolved a lot of power to SIGs. SIGs have ownership of repos and sub-trees of the main repo, and we need to encourage contributors to like find a home in a SIG for new work that doesn't obviously live somewhere, I guess.
I think that is a particular problem with this project because, and I ran into a lot of problem too, trying to get people to understand what it was we were testing. The features that we were testing are cross-cut, right? The pod disruption budget, when we wrote it, seemed like something related to the scheduler, but now it's actually relevant mostly to workloads. And we were also, in a certain sense, we were running these apps with stateful set, something that Workbuzz is responsible for. But then what we were really testing was the upgrade mechanism that respects the pod disruption budget by talking to the evict endpoint. And that, what SIG is that? I don't even know. Right? So I see what you're saying, but like when you've got a feature like this that doesn't really seem to have clear ownership, it's hard to say. It's important. But like it's the emergent behavior of all the things working together that we're verifying. It was even important that we test real apps. We wanted to say, look, if you run Cassandra like so, you can expect it to work through a node upgrade. So like, I don't know.
All right, this does sound familiar because this is, I couldn't find the specific PR, but I do remember a PR that I saw and a couple other folks saw, and I do remember pushing back against it in the context of it does cross-cut a lot. It was testing of real-world applications on a Kubernetes cluster
and making sure that a specific feature worked. So it was this big end-to-end test that involved pieces that were under the control of a lot of different SIGs. And the question was, where's the right place to run this? I think the SIG testing pushback was in the context of, we're trying to reduce the amount of really large tests that are used for release blocking signal. So finding a place to run big examples like that to generate a binary yes or no decision is something we ought to decide, but it didn't seem like it was part of the core of Kubernetes to make sure that these specific third-party applications worked with this specific Kubernetes feature.
Right. And so I guess that's another facet that I felt was difficult about this, is that I was also sort of told, like, we're not sure that this test, not just the test image, like there were kind of two issues, the test image supporting code and then the test itself. There was also this message that this test maybe doesn't belong here, but we are also not sure where it does belong. Even though we can all kind of agree that it's important to have a signal somewhere, sure, maybe it doesn't need to block merges, but it's not as if this is unimportant work. So I don't necessarily need answers to my questions. I really want to point out that I'm just the first person probably to run into this, or one of the first, but like, as Garrett says, as we start to shard these repos, and as we start to tell stories about the way that like the cluster behaves when you make different things work together for you, this stuff will come up more and more.
So a couple of things, well, actually 3 things come to mind. First thing is, it's good for us to identify areas in these user experiences where you're getting conflicting information, like tabs versus spaces. You know, like where are you running in the buzzsaw of opinion versus actual technical implementation details that affect the way things are done, because that's a huge problem. Second one is that it might behoove us to have a concierge type desk for people who don't know where to go with a SIG, or they don't even know what to do. So essentially like a concierge on call for Contribex. So somebody doesn't know what to do. Like you could have gone to, this person and say, here's my thing. What do you think? Where do I go with this? And maybe somebody could have given you an informed opinion, or at least pointed you in a better direction, so you didn't have to run around by yourself trying to figure it out. And lastly, just in terms of your issue, I think this is something we're going to see more and more as repos get broken out, but there is nothing to prevent someone to set up their own CI pipeline and everything else against master. It's like, if there are instances where you want to run a specific set of tests, we ought to make it easy for somebody to set up their own test infrastructure.
So about that last thing, like, there is nothing to stop me is in a sense true, but then the next thing you said, whereas we ought to make it easy, that's the devil, right? Like, it's strictly possible, but like now I have a million more things to think about, learn, understand, and maintain. And I totally can't take everyone's test in the long run, but yeah, it felt like if I'd had to cross that bridge as well, I would have really been crazy.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that it's easy or even the right answer, but the thing that Aaron brought up, and this is something that we agonize over at the SIG leadership thing, and we agonize over it every single day, is how do we keep this project from becoming the Hydra, where you have so many things that are crossing so many lines and so many groups that essentially the velocity starts trending towards zero because nobody can negotiate it. So it's like the more extensible, the more pluggable, all those things that we can do, and maybe we have the ability to check out a Jenkins image that's ready to go and has basically all the things necessary to do the core CI functions, or just thinking crazy, right?
Yeah. Please no Jenkins. I mean, again, you're begging a question that SIG testing is desperately trying to work towards, where we're trying to get the entire stack of what we use to test Kubernetes end to end be completely open source. The 2 pieces that are not open source right now are test grid and the code that scrapes results from GCS in a format that is consumable by test grid.
Test Grid and Kubernetes are both App Engine apps. So if those could be written to run on Kubernetes, that would be great. But right now, the source for them is open. You just happen to need an App Engine to run them. But we're getting to the point where you can use Prow you can use stand-up Prow on your own Kubernetes cluster and use it to run tests. I think that this quarter you're going to see Istio and OpenShift Origin be fantastic proofs of concept of using this to test more than just Kubernetes, but multiple projects that have multiple repositories. Further, I think we're open to the idea of people contributing their own jobs through a process that's starting to get better documented, but could certainly use some help. And the other thing I'll highlight, I think that Pat unfortunately ran into a case of it was a guinea pig for one of these big cross-cutting concerns. It is correct that this is something that will come up more often, and probably what would be useful in this scenario is to get the appropriate heads together to figure this out for the first time so that we have the appropriate template to use going forward. Instead, it sounds like what happened was getting pinballed around between a bunch of people who were stakeholders, but you never got the complete set of stakeholders together to craft what we would like to do the next time this comes up. Does that sound fair? You're muted, Matt, sorry.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I'd be willing to help sit down to make sure that with whoever those stakeholders are to kind of write a draft of what we think we should tell people the next time this comes up. The other thing I'd be in support of, if we can staff it, I don't know how much work it would be. I think the concierge idea is great. That's who I felt was missing. So I would love for there to be such a person.
So on that front, what I was going to say is something I have been organically doing. I'm really bad at marketing or documenting this. Is I just sort of troll through and look for PRs that have the needs okay to test label applied. That's representative of somebody who's not a member of the Kubernetes organization. So they have no right privileges. They're likely a first-time contributor to this. So right away, I can /OK to test to help push things forward to generate some CI signal, which might encourage the reviewers to look at it. And also that means I'm subscribed to what that looks like moving forward, and I can help triage to the right SIG or poke things. But I agree, that's not necessarily the same thing as a formal role. And also it wouldn't have helped Matt because Matt is a member of the Kubernetes organization and a member of the team that's got write privileges on the repo. So I definitely wouldn't have noticed that a Googler who has history with the project of over a year actually hasn't contributed anything in about a year. And so they're just brand new to the process again, right? Sorry, you're raising your hand, Justin?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so this is very much something that I've hit a lot in my recent contributions, which is we now have the concierge feels like the role of assignee. And now what we have is we have multiple assignees. And so assignee doesn't really mean anything anymore. No one's responsible for a PR anymore. So I was wondering why we have multiple assignees.
Multiple assignees is in case one of them happens to be a human on vacation or who has a real life and they don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. But I mean, the problem is that then they sit there for 3 months with everyone's assuming the other guy is doing or girl is doing it. And I think that if we have that, we can just, if someone goes on holiday for an extended period, then we can deal with that.
This has been codified into an issue that I think Garrett filed into the testinfo repo that unfortunately we in SIG testing don't have time to work on, but you would basically want the bot to identify pull requests that have had assignees given to them, but the assignees have done nothing. So the pull request itself is stale, not because the author isn't commenting, but because the assignees are doing nothing. What's the appropriate response here? Today, the response is, looks like the PR is stale, we're going to start nagging, and if it doesn't have any activity within 90 days, we close it. A thought is we could try rotating to 2 other random assignees. The question would be, at what velocity should we do that? Should we do that for owners? Should we do that for approvers? Right now, there's this weird thing where we don't actually notify approvers. And the hope is that somebody who is less bandwidth taxed, who's just a reviewer, can make sure that the PR looks good, and then it gets manually bounced to an approver by way of somebody's notifying the person, right? So there's room for improvement, and there are issues open if you want to help work on it.
Well, I mean, I think I would love to work on it, but right now, so what I would think we should do is we should keep track of who isn't doing their reviews and remove them from approvers or reviewers or whatever it is. And there's a handful of people who are like notorious, and I'm probably among them, for like not doing reviews for like months at a time. But right now we have no way to gather that statistic because there are 2 approvers.
So if you, this was something we had asks for. I don't know if there's a fix-it going on right now, but like one suggestion I made in the past is I feel like we collectively, and I'm talking about the whole project, I feel like we don't do the greatest job of measuring the before and then theorizing what the after is going to look like and then measuring the after. We just go ahead and make decisions. And so I think this is a great case where if you could actually help us write the script or the reporting tool that identifies the state of who is stale, that would give us some actionable data, right? Because I agree with you. I have that feeling based on my experience as a human, but I also don't want to like do the subjective thing and just call out people, right? I'd rather have a more open, objective process that could be reused. And that's what prevents me from making incremental progress on this.
I guess I am wondering, like, we could try, yes. I guess there are 2 things I'm asking. One of which is like, we need the accusation brush or like the metrics brush, and then we need to know who to apply that brush to. And I guess you're saying we should make the brush before we have someone to apply it to.
Make your wall of shame and then sort it by ascending or whatever, and then go to
wall of co-shame.
If you can pass a link to that tag or whatever it was, Aaron, I'm interested in looking to seeing. Because I would love to socialize to maybe experienced reviewers be like, hey, these are people who don't have right access, and it could be, as we onboard people, I'd like to get them reviewing and onboarding people and things like that. And I think that'd be a nice URL to socialize.
Yeah, let me just drop it in the docs here.
Just whenever, it doesn't have to be right now.
Okay.
Just mentioning that.
All right. I think I think we're out of time for the day. But thank you for joining us. This will be going up on YouTube later this afternoon if you want to go back and watch something. Anybody have anything else?
Thanks, Elsie, for running the meeting.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Thanks all.